Hi, and welcome to this Photoshop tutorial. Today I'll be explaining you how you can use the pen tool to create a path and how you can create a vector mask from this path. Finally, I'll be explaining you the great benefits of using clipping masks. I'll be working in Adobe Photoshop CS6 and I'm using a Wacom Intuos 4 tablet. This does not mean that anything that I'll be doing today that you can't do that using a mouse, but the Wacom tablet is just more for convenience and comfort. Okay, well, let's get started. I made a pencil sketch of a shoe and inserted this into Photoshop. Please note that the pen tool is not only useful for designing or sketching in Photoshop, but that it can be also used for many different purposes, like enhancing photos. The shoe is here just used as an example to explain the principle of the pen tool. Start with selecting the pen tool on the left hand side. When you create an anchor point and you create a second anchor point, a line is created between the two. You can adjust the curvature by dragging the second anchor point. When you create a third anchor point, you can see that the curvature that's created between the first two anchor points continues to the third anchor point. If you don't want this to happen, then you should hold the Alt key and press the right mouse button and click on top of the second anchor point. You can see that I'm using this constantly when creating a path. I will leave out this part intentionally to show you later the benefits of working with vector masks. Here in the top left you can find the settings of your path, and when clicking on path operations you can see that mine is set to exclude overlapping shapes. When you create a vector mask and you make an inverse selection, the problem is that often another option is selected under path operations. When we go to our layers, select the layer that contains the sketch. Change the blend mode to multiply. Now add a new layer and place this underneath the layer that contains the sketch. With the pen tool selected, press the right mouse button and select Create Vector Mask. Now you can see that the vector mask in that layer has been created. Select the paint bucket and then click on the color picker. I like to work in grayscale and therefore put my blacks to 50%. Press OK and fill the shape. As you can see, one part is left unfilled, as we did not cover that with our path. Now select your direct selection tool, click on the vector mask, and you can see that the path appears again around the silhouette of the shoe. Place the cursor on top of the path and press the right mouse button and click Add Anchor Point. Now an additional anchor point has been created that you can move around freely. An anchor point has two control points. If you want to control these control points individually from each other, then you have to go back to the pen tool. Press the right mouse button and select Convert Point Tool. This tool allows you to control the control points individually. In order to add some shading, let's add a new layer and place this in between the pencil sketch and the vector mask. Click on the layer using the right mouse button and select Create Clipping Mask. Now you have created a clipping mask on top of the layer that contains the vector mask. Anything that you'll do inside this clipping mask is limited to the outline of the vector mask. Now let's add some shading to the shoe to make it a bit more 3D. Select the brush tool. I personally like to use soft brushes. So therefore go to the brush panel, lower the hardness and set the spacing to, for example, 16. Select transfer and set the control of the opacity jitter to pen pressure. I also like to lower the opacity and flow of my brush. This you can do on the top left. Now select the color picker and choose a darker value for the shading of your image. Create a new layer and click with the right mouse button on top of the layer and select Create Clipping Mask. Now you've created a second clipping mask. This mask we'll use for the highlights. Go to the color picker and select a lighter value for the highlights. Now add a new layer so that we can create another vector mask. Go back to the pen tool and start creating a path, just like we did with the entire shoe. After finishing the path, press the right mouse button again and select Create Vector Mask. You can now see that we created a new vector mask, only masking out the parts that we created as a path. You don't need to fill a vector mask with full opaque pixels. You can also use the soft brush that we've been using before and work within the selection of the vector mask. I've constantly been deleting the paths that we've created, as I know that when I press on the vector mask, that the path will occur again. If you want to use this path that you've created for something else, click on the vector mask and go to Paths. You'll see that there's a copy of your vector mask path. By pressing on that twice, you can save it. Let's name it Shoe Clip. What you can do with this is that you can create a new layer and that you can also make a selection and again color it or whatever you like. So today we've covered the pen tool and creating a path and afterwards creating a vector mask and using clipping masks. If you have any questions or comments, please place them down below. And also if there's anything else you would like to know on using Photoshop. And see you in the next tutorial. Alright, bye.